After 13 After 13 episodes of the Signature Weapon series, I finally covered all the 4 stars, and even some 5 stars, from versions 1 through 3. So with episode 14, we can now continue forward to version 4 with some of our favorite Fontaine characters. This video is going to cover my signature weapon ideas for Lynette, Freminet, and Charlotte. I'll keep the intro quick. Additional info can be found down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado, let's get started. Back when I did my Fontaine mini rework video, I gave Lynette a pretty unique buff, which allowed her to change her elemental type. But the reality of her kid is that she's just a generic animal support with some good personal damage, so her weapon is also going to be on that same generic level. Mode Swing has a 565 base attack and a 30.6% energy recharge bonus. For the passive, when the user's current HP changes, they gain an assistive stack for 15 seconds. Assistive grants the user 4 to 8% attack and 3 to 6% all elemental damage, up to a max of 4 stacks. When max stacks are obtained, all the bonuses provided by Assistive will also be granted to the current active character for 12 seconds. This can only occur once every 18 seconds, and all effects can trigger while off-field. The thing I focused on was the trigger condition being HP manipulation. When Lynette casts her skill, she will heal herself by 25% of her max HP, and then consume 24% over a series of 4 ticks. This mechanic mainly has 2 purposes. First is that if you have her at C6 and play her as an on-field DPS, the mechanic can enable Marche as her best set. Second, if she's played with Freminet, you can use the skill to get extra fanfare stacks. But if you play her as a general VV support without Freminet, this mechanic is basically Lynette being a masochist wanting to heal and harm herself for no good reason. And so I wanted the trigger to be HP manipulation because I wanted this mechanic to actually be useful, even in her general support gameplay. And the weapon does just that. When Lynette maxes out her assistive stacks, she grants a total of 32% attack and 24% elemental damage to herself, which is good for her personal damage. But maxing it out also grants the bonus to the active character, which is a slight lore nod to the idea of Lynette sharing the spotlight with another performer. It still works with her on-field playstyle, but I didn't design the weapon to focus on that option, so other damage weapons might still be better for her. As for other users, Freminet is a good support user for the weapon, as she can self-enable the HP drain, but I did choose stats that made it harder to consider this her best option. Higher base attack means a lower ER substat, so this can't fully address her energy needs. Freminet herself also can't use the attack bonus, so she can only use the weapon as a support for attack scaling DPSs instead. And while she can use the elemental damage bonus, she provides a lot of damage percent with her burst already, so the extra amount starts to become a little bit of an overkill. Another user who can use this is Hydro Traveler. If you play them on field, they can consume their own HP and gain the bonus, but 0 damage times 100 is still 0, so... As for other users, this weapon has the same trigger as Marche, so instead of running this on Freminet, you could give the weapon to another unit and pair them with Freminet. To name a few, attack characters like Durin or Xingqiu could deal damage from off-field, but also provide the bonus to the on-fielder. You can also run this on your usual on-fielders, but they aren't going to share the bonuses with anyone, so it's not really recommended. The condition to proc the weapon was pretty easy to pick, because HP manipulation isn't a common mechanic among sword users. But in terms of the bonuses, I had a hard time deciding what to go for. Lynette's role is still as a general off-field DPS and VV support, so there wasn't a special niche to play with. It's a lot of making her do more damage and allowing her team to do more damage. With that being said, the unique aspect of the weapon is the HP manipulation. The generalist role she plays means you can pick other stats for the weapon, like crit or base damage, and it'll still be good as a Lynette-oriented signature. But that's going to do it for this section. Next up is Freminet. Freminet has a special playstyle that allows him to work as either a cryo DPS or a physical DPS. I had to design a weapon that was useful for both playstyles, and I managed to find one that fit pretty well with his gameplay. Windup Wings has a 510 base attack and a 27.6% crit rate bonus. When the user casts their skill, they gain Riptide for 5 seconds, which increases normal attack and skill crit damage by 12 to 24%, and normal attack and skill damage by 16 to 32%. If a skill is cast again when Riptide is still active, the skill crit damage further increases by 12 to 24%, and the effect will end after the next instance of skill damage occurs. This weapon has two major aspects that make it work for Freminet in particular. One, it has a 5-second duration, so it focuses on characters who can cast their skills in quick succession. Two, it has this alternating effect, where skill crit damage bounces between a half and full bonus amount. Let's show what I mean with Freminet himself. When you run his physical playstyle, he'll cast his skill for the initial upward swing, and give himself the damage bonus and crit damage bonus. You do your normal playstyle where you normal attack twice, and then cast your special Shattering Pressure skill. When Shattering Pressure is cast, the skill crit damage effectively doubles, increasing that instance to 48% instead of 24%. The effect will end right after that, so when you cast your regular skill again, it goes back to 24. On the Cryo playstyle, it's a lot quicker. Cast your skill to upward swing and get the bonus, then cast your skill again to get the double crit damage. His special skill is what does the most damage, and this weapon ensures that the strongest part of his kit is the part that gets the most buffs. I designed the Claymore this way to specifically counter Kinich. Kinich is still gonna be the second best user for the weapon because he's also a skill spamming DPS. But the bonus works very differently for him. Unlike with Freminet, where the big hit of his skill always gets the full buff, Kinich's big hits will alternate between the half and full amount. When you start his rotation, you cast your skill, which activates a 24% bonus. Casting it again for the first big hit causes it to have 48% crit damage, but after that, it goes to 0. So the second time you do your big hit, it'll activate the 24% bonus, the third will have the 48% again, and so on and so forth. In somewhat simpler terms, every odd number of big hits will have the full bonus at 48%, while every even number has the half bonus at 24%. I think Kinich is also slightly hindered here because he already has Obsidian Codex. Adding up the artifact with the weapon already hits a crit rate of 72.6%, which means overcapping on that stat is very possible. With that being said, it's not a bad weapon. Based on my probably unreliable calculations, the Freminet signature was only 2% worse than Kinich's signature, so it's still a viable choice on Kinich. As for other alternative users, there aren't really any. The restrictions I have on the weapon make it so that the effect would either end really early upon a second skill cast, or the duration runs out because it's only a 5-second duration. Once again for Freminet, it works on him because he uses his skills much quicker than a 5-second duration, but also because the way he uses his skills allows him to maximize the bonus on the hits that matter the most. That'll do it for his section. The final character is Charlotte. Out of all 3 characters on the list, Charlotte has the most unique weapon passive. For a very long time, I didn't like how the Song of Days Past set was designed. I really like the idea of a set rewarding units with strong front-loaded healing instead, but since that didn't happen, I decided to make Charlotte's weapon do something with that mechanic. Shuttershot has a 510 base attack and a 45.9% energy recharge substat. Upon healing or overhealing an ally, that ally gains Photobomb for 18 seconds. All of their base damage is increased based on 32 to 64% of that healing amount they received, but every time they deal damage, the bonus provides 400 to 800 less damage than the previous instance. Photobomb will end when the bonus amount hits 0 or when the duration expires. Photobomb can trigger while off-field, but can only trigger once every 18 seconds, and its effect is independent among each party member. As mentioned earlier, this weapon heavily incentivizes front-loaded healing, but it also works well with team-wide healing, which is something Charlotte has a ton of. When she casts her burst, all allies are healed, and this activates Photobomb on every ally, providing a strong initial base damage bonus. To show you an actual number representation of the bonus, if she heals for something like 10,000, the first bonus is a 6,400 base damage bonus. The second instance will be 5,600, the third is 4,800, and so on until it hits 0. The effect is independent, so every character gets their own set of base damage buffs to work with. This also means that Charlotte is a lot better if you run her with units who deal a good amount of off-field damage, since they can also take advantage of the buff. On the topic of off-field damage, base damage is a much more noticeable buff when it's applied on characters who already have low multipliers. Charlotte herself has really low damage, which means the difference in her personal damage gets a lot stronger because of the buff. It also means that the smaller damage percent bonuses she gets from her kit are going to be a little more meaningful for her damage. The idea also extends to her teammates. For example, if you run Seedlali, her periodic damage is really weak on its own, but it can get a nice buff when you apply a base damage bonus on top of her 40% Cinder City bonus. Charlotte herself is also a pretty general healer, so whatever team she works in, so will the weapon. Melt teams, freeze teams, physical and superconduct, fridge, and a burning team where Charlotte's low application doesn't get rid of the aura would make for a pretty weird and fun burn-melt comp. Photobomb is an effect that only takes into account the very first instance of healing, so when you cast Charlotte's Burst, all the extra bits of healing that occur afterwards don't count towards her bonus. This includes her C1 and C6, but it doesn't matter as much since her burst is the majority of her output. It's kinda reminiscent of photography itself. You don't always get a chance to do a reshoot, so you gotta make that first photo count. And on the topic of photo analogies, I was inspired by a few others when designing this weapon. I kind of imagined the passive like an old film camera. Putting more investment into a good film camera means you could find one that takes better quality photos, and also something that holds more film. For the weapon, you invest more healing to get a higher damage bonus, and more instances of that bonus. Now, for alternate users, the Catalyst isn't designed to be a shill weapon. It's perfectly usable on other characters. But you want to prioritize units who have strong front-loaded healing. This not only makes the bonus stronger, but it also makes it last longer. And this is a very important detail since the cooldown on the effect is 18 seconds. Both Baiju's skill and Shan Yun's burst provide a strong instance of initial healing, meaning they can buff the entire party every rotation. And there's no weird limitations for these two either. Yes, Charlotte has a leg up in the fact that she simply provides higher healing on her burst, but that doesn't disregard the others who can still use it very well. Moving on, Barbara's burst provides more healing than Charlotte's, but it's balanced out by her insanely high ER needs. More likely than not, you'd be casting her burst every other rotation. You can still use the weapon on single target healing as well. On rotations where Barbara doesn't use her burst, her skill's periodic healing can still work to trigger the effect. The same thing applies to Kokomi's jellyfish healing, but because both of these abilities are periodic healing, the bonus you get on the Catalyst isn't going to be as strong. It's also an okay alternative for self-users who deal personal damage. Neuvillette and Risley can use it on themselves and get a small bonus for their attacks. But the healing they end up receiving is going to be trivial as well, so it's not really a meta choice. And to clarify on Neuvillette specifically, when he uses a charge attack, he heals 48% of his HP, but it's 16% per water droplet absorbed, so the buff will be much lower. Alright, that's gonna do it for the video. I actually had the Lynette and Charlotte weapons on the back burner for a couple years at this point, so I'm really happy they finally get to see the light of day. Realistically, buffs for Fontaine characters would come in the form of actual character buffs, but I think the weapons are a nice icing on the cake, just to give a little more utility for them. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know what parts you liked or what you might change. If you want to share more ideas with our community, consider joining my Discord server. Thank you again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!